The Birmingham taxi driver stabbed to death in a frenzied attack.
How do you explain to a small child that his father ain't coming back?
Can you name his killer? Hello and welcome to Crimewatch. We're live with senior detectives from forces from across the country trying to help crack some of the biggest cases in Britain tonight. Like that shocking murder of a minicab driver in Birmingham 6 weeks ago. Is this the killer confessing to his murder?
Yes, now the murder on Hawksley.
Right.
And I'm only walking around there. And I tell you what, the police would never have caught me.
Are you saying you did it?
I'm telling you, I done it.
More on that later. Also on the programme, can you help find a murderer who's escaped the law for 25 years? He raped and killed 17-year-old Melanie Rode, something that's as raw to her family now as it ever was.
She had so much to live for. She should be here. She should be here with us.
And as well as this bunch, I'm after these thugs. The bank robbers who bludgeoned security guards with a sledgehammer. Can you help put them behind bars tonight?
And the footballer who thought he'd got away with murder. The incredible story of how it took the testimony of a remarkable woman and a change in the law on double jeopardy to finally bring Mario Celaire here to justice.
But first, this is 36-year-old father of three, Mohammed Arshad, just known as Arshad, to his friends and family in Birmingham. The hard-working dad made his living as a cabbie. Well, 6 weeks ago, on the last day of term, he'd picked his sons up from school and taken them from a haircut before heading out to work. The lads weren't just excited about the summer holidays, they had also had some great news. They were going to have a new baby brother or sister. They couldn't have been more happy. But as they waved goodbye to their dad, they had no idea it would be the very last time that they would ever see him.
Oh. Idiot.
Arshad was a family man. His motto was just work hard and do as much good as you can. I don't know how he did everything to please everyone, because he could only please, most of the people some of the time, and not all of them all the time, but he managed to do everything. He was just earning a living for himself, his family, his parents back home, and he was supporting them. And that's what he was out that night doing.
On a car from Lindsworth approach, but I'll walk up and get it outside Broadmeadow School. Kings Norton. Peter.
The booking from the man calling himself Peter was made from this telephone kiosk in Moneyhull Hall Road, Kings Norton. It was 19 minutes past 8 on the night of Wednesday the 22nd of July. A few minutes later, the job was allocated to Arshad. This was his last known fare.
No problem. I'll take it.
At 21 minutes past 8, a man is captured on CCTV walking away from the direction of the telephone kiosk. It's not clear whether he's white, Asian or of mixed race, but he has short dark hair and a distinctive walk. That same man is then seen walking past the gates to Broadmeadow School along the same road. He's the only person to pass between the cameras from the time the call is made to Arshad's taxi pulling up. We believe this is the man calling himself Peter.
Peter?
Yeah.
Where to?
Kings Norton.
Looks like it's clearing up.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it far?
No, just carry on.
It was a frenzied attack. Arshad had been stabbed 6 times in the head with a black-handled kitchen knife. The onslaught was so ferocious that the blade buckled and the knife broke in two. Arshad couldn't survive. Despite the efforts of paramedics and doctors, he died later that night in hospital. His wife, who was pregnant with their 4th child, was at his side. 2 hours after the attack at 10:45 p.m, Arshad's taxi was found here in Shannon Road on the Hawksley estate in Kings Norton. His takings for the day, just under £200, were still there. A few coins were found scattered nearby. The attack was so violent and savage, whoever murdered Arshad would have been covered in his blood. From forensics, we believe he went off in this direction, further into the estate. Did you see him, or do you know where he went next? If you have any information, no matter how insignificant you think it is, it may just help us bring his family some peace.
When I look at them little ends, the eldest knows that his father ain't coming back. The middle one, he's got a slight idea of what's happened. The youngest is still glued to the window, thinking that any second my father's gonna pull up and my wait's gonna be over. How do you explain to a small child that someone's stabbed his dad 6 times in the head, and when he asks you why and you can't answer that, then tell me how you feel.
You can't answer that. I'm joined by Detective Superintendent Sheila Thorns, who's heading up the investigation. So, 3 children, a pregnant wife. How is Arshad's family right now?
They're completely devastated by this. They just can't understand why Arshad was attacked in this way.
As you said in the film, a frenzied and vicious attack. Do you have any idea why he was attacked? Was it a robbery?
It's difficult to say. The motive is unclear. There were a few coins taken from the vehicle, but nearly £200 in takings was still in the vehicle. We just don't know what the motive was.
Now, Sheila, you've brought for us to hear a recording that's never publicly been heard. Explain to us what we're about to hear. It is a man confessing to the murder.
On Sunday night, Sunday just gone at 7 o'clock, we received a 999 call from a male caller who actually said he was responsible for the murder on the Hawksley estate.
OK, let's hear it.
Yes, now the murder on Hawksley.
Right.
I mean, and I'm only walking around there, and I tell you what, the police would never have caught me.
Are you saying you did it?
I'm telling you, I done it.
Do you think it's the killer?
It's difficult to say. This could be a hoax or a prank. But whatever this caller's motive, we need to now identify him and eliminate him from the inquiry.
That's for sure. Now, you showed us in your film a couple of important pictures. Let's take a look at them now. First of all, moving pictures. What are we seeing here, Sheila?
This is the man walking from the direction of the phone box towards Broadmeadow School, where the taxi was to pick up the caller called Peter.
OK, now that's quite a distinctive gait, as you said. He walks quite distinctively. Now, what are we seeing?
This is the camera at Broadmeadow School picking the same man up outside the school where the taxi eventually picks him up.
OK, people can get a closer look at those on our website. Of course, let's move on to the car then. The car that we got in the reconstruction, it was actually a little bit lighter than the car itself.
Yeah, Arshad's car was a dark blue Ford Galaxy.
Do you think that this attack took place on the Hawksley estate?
We believe the attack took place in Wast Hills Lane, and the vehicle that Arshad was driving was then taken by the attacker and driven to the Hawksley estate and left on Shannon Road.
Do you think the killer is from the estate?
We believe the killer has connections with the estate. Whether he lives there or has connections on that estate, it's not clear.
Now, people who live on the estate will know that you and your team have been busy taking DNA samples from teenage boys from 14 right up to men of 44. Now, that suggests to me that you've got a DNA sample of the killer, have you?
The vehicle Arshad was driving was a taxi, so it's used by the general public. We do have a number of forensic samples. They may be from innocent users of the vehicle, and we do need to eliminate all the samples that we have.
OK, Sheila, for now, thank you very much. You saw, that was Arshad's brother-in-law that was talking so emotionally there. Do think of his wife, his family, do the right thing. I should tell you there's a 10 grand reward for information leading to a conviction. So if you can help, you must call us now, 0500 600 600, or if you'd like to remain anonymous, that's fine. You can call the independent charity, Crime Stoppers. I'll give you their number now. It's 0800 555 111. If you need to see those reconstructions and the pictures, again, they're online, bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. Now, here's Rav with this month's CCTV.
Now, if you're a fan of The Village People, you might just recognise one of this month's criminals caught on camera.
7:30 in the morning at Co-op in Brooklands, Manchester last summer, and one of the Village People seems to be in town. But YMCA is the last thing on his mind. With a mate waiting outside, he goes up to the cashier, pulls out a hammer and demands staff hand over money, fags and booze. And he doesn't stop there, pinching this customer's handbag before making a getaway in a stolen car. Only minutes before, the same pair tried to rob a newsagent just down the road. He might look funny, but stealing and terrorising staff is no joke. Wipe the smile off his face and tell us who he is. Check these two out at Denham Railway Station back in April. It's 2:30 in the morning and the station's closed, so I don't think it's a ticket they're after. Using a crowbar, they force open the machine, but there's one thing they haven't spotted. Surprise! Say cheese. They start nicking cash, taking hundreds of pounds and costing thousands more in damage. They need to be stopped before they do it again, so come on, take a good look and give us their names. This next lot are casing the joint outside this jeweller's in Ulverston, Cumbria, also back in April. Ah, the old hand over the face disguise. You do know we can still see you. They return an hour later with a couple of mates fully covered up. A bit late now. They break in, smash up their display cabinets and make off with over 20 grand's worth of watches. They escape in this Audi TT, but couldn't escape the cameras. Who are they? Friday night in Durham in August 2007. It all kicks off after a bunch of lads insult some girls walking by. The men they're with take offence and a fight breaks out. One guy is knocked unconscious. He had to have reconstructive surgery and a metal plate fitted in his jaw. His attacker thought he could just walk away, but time to think again. Police already know what he looks like after tracking him down here at the Hartlepool Supporters Club earlier that night. Now they just need your help naming him. This was just drunken, mindless violence. Don't let him lash out again.
Think you recognise anyone? Call us here in the studio, 0500 600 600, or you can text us on 63399. Just type crime, space, and then your message, and it's important to leave your space or your message won't get through. And if you need a second look at tonight's CCTV, it's also online, bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch.
Still ahead, the hunt for the bank robbers who bludgeoned 2 security guards with sledgehammers.
I thought this man is going to kill me here and now. In his eyes, you can see he just wanted to hurt and kill. Is this the end of my life? I'm going to die on this floor.
Closing in on the fraudsters who've conned dozens of pensioners out of their life savings.
And the story of the footballer who thought he'd got away with murder, how Mario Celaire was finally brought to justice because of a change in the law on double jeopardy.
All of that then still to come. Now, in our March show, we had a huge response to a cold case appeal. Despite it dating back 25 years, nearly 200 people called with information about the Rotherham rapist who preyed on women in the city back in the 1980s. Detectives are now confident that they will get a result. Thanks for your calls. Now, tonight, we are hoping for success on another case that's remained unsolved for decades. The rape and murder of a teenager, 17-year-old Melanie Road. For a quarter of a century, Melanie's family have had to live with the knowledge that her killer has never been caught. Can you bring them some comfort by naming him tonight?
Hiya.
She had so many friends. She was taking her A-levels. The world was her oyster.
Karate, ni oki.
She wanted to go to university, of which she'd applied to quite a number. She was never sad. She was always very happy here and always had lots of friends, and I don't think I ever saw her sad.
She had her life ahead of her. She had so much to live for. My life was opening up for her. We went down to Bath and we went to the travel agents. Yeah, she had a Greek boyfriend and she wanted to travel with him. I'm sure we bought a plant for Mum and Dad. Dropped her off by the hotel. Now kissing me on the cheek. And that was the last time I saw her.
It was June the 8th, 1984, the last day of the Bath Festival. Thousands of people were starting to leave the city. School kids had just finished their exams and were planning their future, just like 17-year-old Melanie Road. But this day would be the last day of her life.
I've been practicing my Greek. Calamari.
Calamera. What's the problem, man? What's your problem? You still... Oh, you...
Come on, let's go, let's go, let's go.
Oh, I want a burger.
You always want a burger.
Come on, let's get...
See you later.
Are you sure you don't want me to get you a taxi?
Oh no, honestly, I'll be fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah, promise. Alright. See you later.
Melanie said goodbye to her friends at this crossroads. They headed this way along Pulteney Bridge. Melanie headed this way along Bridge Street towards her home. It was the last time that Melanie Road was definitely seen alive.
Melanie had less than a mile to walk to get home. It was a journey she had made countless times before, so most likely she took her usual route. Up Broad Street, up the hill along Lansdowne Road, right at the old farmhouse pub onto St Stephen's Road. Melanie was now very nearly home.
My son Ian went up to a house on the left-hand side, and after he delivered the milk, he shouted out to me,
Dad, there's a woman lying on the ground over there.
because of the colour of the skin, being very pale, I thought it was a dummy from a shop window, which sort of gave me a bit of relief for a few seconds. Then as I got closer, I realised it wasn't, and as a young girl, felt for the side of her neck, but a pulse was no pulse, and the body was stone cold. As it was somebody I did know, which was one of my customers' daughters, Melanie.
I flew down to Bath, and I didn't believe it until I saw all the police everywhere and realised that it really was true. And then the next 2 weeks we just spent crying the whole time.
It was my little sister. I should have taken care of her.
Melanie's murder kicked off a massive police investigation. We made 6,000 separate inquiries and arrested 94 men.
25 years later, and Melanie's killer is still out there. This case remains open. Now we have brand new evidence. DNA left at the scene. We believe it belongs to the killer. Now we need your help to find him.
1984, Bath, a city with a transient population. Do you know a man here that summer who could have done this? Someone who appeared with unexplained injuries or left the city suddenly.
You might be worried about putting an innocent man in the frame. Don't be. The DNA belongs to one person only. So give us a name and let the science tell us if it's Melanie's murderer.
I still have nights where I'm going all it over in my mind. As I say, if it's like that for me, what can it be like for the family?
Just like a space, an empty hole. She should be here. She should be here with us.
Melanie's still with me because she's my guardian angel and she's always there, giving me guidance. Over the last 25 years, it's been a living nightmare to know that someone is out there that killed my sister. This person took Melanie away from me.
I just want to know why and who, and for somebody to be caught. Melanie's at rest, but they could do it again. I don't want anybody else to go through this.
As a family devastated, I'm joined now by DCI Mike Carter, who is heading up the inquiry. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. It's 25 years on, but the emotions are still red raw for that family, not surprisingly. You think you can solve this tonight?
Yes, we do, Kirsty. Very hopeful. We have new technology. The advances have actually given us a full DNA profile of Melanie's killer. And it should be easy for us to identify who it is.
Now, Melanie was raped and then she was murdered. What can you tell us? What does that tell us, indeed, about the man who killed her?
Well, this was a very brutal attack. And that would suggest to us that the person who did it probably would have exhibited similar behaviour before. It would have escalated to this. So maybe domestic violence, other less serious assaults.
So who is it you're appealing to tonight, then?
Well, Bath is a transient population, as was said in the film, and
Yeah.
you know, there were a lot of people coming and going at that time of year, so it might not be someone locally. So, you know, any wives, girlfriends, partners, anybody who this person may have spoken to and given a clue, anyone you may suspect, you know, please give us a name, because we will be able to eliminate people if you're not sure.
Yeah, that is the crucial aspect here. As Mike said, because he's got the killer's DNA, men can easily be eliminated. So if you had suspicions around about the time, but you didn't call the police, now is the time to do it. If you think you can help, please pick up the phone. Do it for Melanie's family. Our number is 0500 600 600. Now, back to Rav with some faces in the frame.
Kicking things off tonight is this guy, James Gilmore, wanted in relation to 2 attempted murders in Liverpool last summer. Gilmore's originally from Scotland but speaks with a Scouse accent and is thought to have tattoos on his left hand. There's a £5 reward for information leading to his arrest, so if you know where he's hiding, get calling. My number 2 here is 54-year-old Mustafa Izzet. He's wanted in connection to a massive £400,000 fraud. The victim was a 51-year-old widow. Mustafa was born in Cyprus but has links to Bedfordshire, and we think he may be in London at the moment. Number 3 here is a particularly nasty piece of work. David William Pugh is wanted for rape and witness intimidation. He was charged in 2005 but failed to turn up at trial and has not been seen since. He used to be the landlord of the New York pub in Swansea, has links to Barry and could well be on the run in Spain. Next is Mark Fitzgibbon, wanted in connection to a string of drug trafficking offences in Liverpool. He's a Scouser, but has links to the North East and South Wales and could also be hiding out in Spain or Holland. So, do you know where Fitzgibbon, Pugh or any of the others are hiding tonight? Don't wait, phone now, 0500 600 600, or you can text us on 63399. Just type crime, space, and then your message, and it's important to leave that space or your message won't get through. And you can also check these mugshots out online, bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. And remember, all our most wanted stay on our website until they're caught.
Now, when 78-year-old Roy Banks took a phone call from a police officer telling him he'd been the victim of a bank card fraud, he was more than happy to cooperate. But the call was the start of the fraud, not the end, and Mr. Banks became the victim of a very elaborate scam, robbing him of over £12,000. It's a scene that's been repeated all over Essex, East London and Hertfordshire. So far, over 100 elderly people have suffered the same fate at the hands of a gang of con men. Well, Roy Banks has taken the brave step of joining us here in the studio. Nice to see you, Mr. Banks. And Chris Krell is heading up the investigation. Chris, I'll chat to you in a minute. Roy, can you start by telling me what happened when the gang called?
I had a phone call one evening, said they were the police, and that someone had been taking money off my card. So they said they were going to come round and see me, which they did. Well, these 2 people. One was white with hair cut very close. The other was of mixed race, you know.
So, Mr. Banks, how did you feel when you found out that you'd been the victim of the fraud?
Extremely angry and somewhat embarrassed that I let myself get caught that way.
What would you like to say to warn other people? We've got lots of people watching tonight. What would you like to say to them?
Well, I'm told if they get any inquiry of that nature, get in touch with the police. I mean, they said they were the police, which of course stopped me doing it.
And it was £12,000 that you lost. That is a lot of money.
Pretty dear.
Chris, this has happened to a lot of people. Roy has been good enough to come in and share this horrible experience with us. It must be a pretty sophisticated scam, this.
It is, yes, and we're currently investigating 110 offences. Unfortunately, one elderly victim lost over £25,000, their entire life savings to this gang.
Now, I mentioned briefly the areas there. Give us a bit more detail on where and how these people are operating.
Indeed, all of the offences have been committed in North East London, with some offences in Hertfordshire and Essex. The method in all of the offences is identical. The suspects pose as police officers and telephone the elderly victims to indicate there's been a fraud on their bank accounts. During a series of telephone calls to gain the victim's trust, they then go to the victim's house in plain clothes and collect cash, as in Roy's case, or more frequently their credit cards and their PIN numbers. They say this is part of their supposed investigation.
I mean, it's sophisticated. It's no wonder that people are taken in by this. Do you think, given the level of sophistication, you say a number of calls there, do you think it's a large network, a big gang that's doing it?
Yes, that's correct. We believe there's a large number of people conspiring together to carry out this fraud. They live locally and they operate locally as well. They also share information with each other around this fraud.
Okay, let's get them then. You've got CCTV pictures. Talk me through what we're seeing. 4 single shots, first of all. Tell us about these people.
The first 4 images that we have are people unknown to police at this time, and we would urge anybody who recognises any of the images to contact police immediately.
So these were people, these are pictures you got of people using cards that were part of the scam.
Yes.
Now, crucially, you've also got 2 named suspects. Let's take a look at them and tell us about them.
Yes. The first image on the left there, there's a person by the name of Kashif Nawaz. He's aged 32 years of age. And the person on the right is a person by the name of Kamal Kant. He's aged 25 years of age. They're known to reside and frequent around areas around Barkingside and Ilford. They also frequent betting shops within those areas.
Now, we really want to hear from people who know these guys, but you also want to hear from anyone else who might have been a victim of this same scam.
Absolutely. We do believe these suspects have committed a number of crimes, and police want to know about every one of these offences.
Okay, Chris. Well, we hope we get a lot of calls, and Roy, we hope we get a result for you, and thank you very much for taking the time to come in to talk to us tonight. We appreciate it. So, if you recognise any of these people, then pick up the phone, or you could text us now. They've got to be stopped. This is awful. If you need to take another look at them, they're on our website, bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. If you don't have access to the internet and you're worried, then you can call the detectives here in the studio. They're waiting to take your call. For help and support if you've been a victim of crime, there is the victim support line 0845 30 30 900. Now here's Rav with some more of his most wanted.
Right, the phones are hotting up, but keep those calls coming, and we desperately need your help to find number 5 tonight. He's Alan Wright, wanted for 4 serious sexual offences involving a child. Now, he pleaded guilty back in May, but didn't show up in court and needs to be found fast, as there's a high risk of him reoffending. He has a tattoo of a woman's face on his right arm and a scar on his abdomen. He has links to Yorkshire and was last seen in Leeds. Next is a serial fraudster and thief, Nicholas Kuttner. He's wanted for stealing 33 grand's worth of diamonds from a London jeweller's in February. Posing as a wealthy businessman, Kuttner conned staff and then disappeared. As well as London, he has links to Surrey and Birmingham. 7 is a Frederick Alfonso Williams, wanted for possession with intent to supply Class A drugs. Jamaican-born Williams was charged but went on the run and was sentenced to 4 years in his absence. He has links to Southampton. And last, but by no means least, is Michael Henry, and police want to speak to him about the murder of Sonny Easy, who was stabbed to death in Greenwich in March. 38-year-old Henry certainly gets around. He's known to have spent time in South London, but also has links to Nottingham, Birmingham, Brighton and the Highfields area of Leicester. And he uses the names Flay and Flair and is believed to have shaved his head and beard since this photo was taken. There's a 20 grand reward leading to his arrest, so you know what to do. So it's time this lot crawled out of the woodwork. So if you've seen them, help us nail them tonight. Call now 0500 600 600, or you can text us on 63399. Just type crime, space, and then your message.
Now, Monday the 13th of July started out like any other day for the 2 security guards in our next film. Their job was to fill up cash machines across the Midlands, but after arriving at the Abbey Bank in Kettering, they were ambushed and set upon by men armed with sledgehammers. It was a scene of appalling and extraordinary violence, every second of which was caught on camera.
We've just been attacked by 2 armed robbers. They've smashed my legs and shoulders with a sledgehammer.
So anyone there needs ambulance?
Yes, we definitely did. That's agony.
It was just another Monday. We'd already done 3 or 4 sites as we normally do. Everything was all clear and we started the service. I was securing the front door as a black car screeched to a halt. Seen 2 assailants running straight towards me, wearing balaclavas and black outfits, carrying sledgehammers. I was shouting to my partner to run. He was shouting and then he was just running towards the back of the branch. All I see is a sledgehammer come flying through the air. I knew I'd been hit with the sledgehammer. I was gasping for breath, I just could not breathe. And all I could hear at the time was, open it, open it.
I'm panicking, I don't know what to do, how to react.
I remember getting a blow to the back of my head. At that time, split second, I thought, I'm doing as you've instructed me to do. Why on earth are you hitting me?
I kept telling the guy to calm down, just trying to calm him down, and that made him worse. If anything, he was telling me don't tell me to calm down. He wanted to be in control. There was no doubt about that. And this guy, he was a complete nutcase, lunatic. I thought, this man's going to kill me here and now. In his eyes, you can see, you watch certain films of the people that are completely demonic. He just wanted to hurt and kill. And at the time, I look at picture in my mind was my little girl and my partner, that I'm ever going to see these people again. So, is this the end of my life? I'm going to die on this floor. At this point, it went quiet. You hear the car screech away, and it was relief. You felt it'd gone, and it was over, and I'm still alive. That's the main thing. I'm still here, and I'm alive. It's a long road to recovery, really. You think you're getting over certain things, and anything can remind you of it and bring it all back. Watching a certain film, people talking about it, it all comes back, and every time you think, because subconsciously you've dealt with it, you haven't.
After the first few weeks after the incident, every time I went to bed, closed my eyes, the whole event was replayed in my mind over and over again. These people who carried out this brutal attack, they need to be found and taken off the streets and put away. I suppose I could count myself lucky. The next person who's going to suffer what my colleague and myself did might not be so lucky. There might be a funeral to attend.
Terrible pictures, horrific violence there. Well, I'm joined by DS Alison Toll, who's heading up the investigation. You want to catch the men, obviously, but you want to hear from witnesses tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody who saw what happened that day, we'd urge them to pick up the phone and call in.
Sure. And the car, it was black, it was...
Skoda Phobia. It was stolen from Burwell in Cambridgeshire on the 11th of July, but not used in our offence till the 13th of July. Right. In the meantime, we'd like to know where it was and who fitted the clone plates. It was on clone plates from a vehicle from the Greater Manchester area. In addition, it may have had a headlight out during those 2 days, so that may spark somebody's memory.
OK, people might remember that. These things here, they're called in the trade, I believe, cash cassettes. Are they? Now, they hold a lot of cash. Do you reckon the thugs who did this would have been flashing the cash after the attack?
There was a substantial amount of cash stolen from this offence. Somebody out there knows who did this. We would urge them to please contact us, because the level of violence used was absolutely horrific, and we want to stop these men before they offend again.
It really was. Those pictures were shocking on the CCTV. What do you know about these guys? What can you tell us for definite?
Well, we know the attackers were two white males. They were dressed in black, wore balaclavas. One male was particularly stocky and tall, and unusually one of the males had his trousers tucked into white socks.
Okay.
With regards to accents, there was no discernible regional accent.
OK, you think there was another guy involved?
Most definitely. There was a gentleman in the Skoda Phobia getaway car.
OK, for now, thanks very much, Alison. I should tell you there is a substantial reward on offer for information leading to a conviction. You saw the pictures, truly appalling. If you know anything that could help, then please do call us here in the studio. Let me give you the number. It's 0500 600 600, or if you'd prefer, you can remain anonymous. Call the independent charity, Crime Stoppers. I'll give you their number too. Their number is 0800 555 111. That's 0800 555 111. Now, here's Matthew and Rav with some news on some past cases.
Well, first, the latest on a case we featured on the last programme, the murder of 35-year-old Michelle Samaravira, who was found strangled and raped in a children's playground in Walthamstow in May. Michelle was the third victim of the so-called calendar killer, who'd struck at least 3 times in 3 months. Well, our appeal generated over 50 new leads for the police, and detectives now know the killer has attacked at least one other woman, That assault took place at the end of April and once again in the Waltham Forest area of London. But the attacker still needs to be caught, so let's take a good look at the EFIT. Call now if you've seen him or think you know who he is. The number is there on the screen.
Next, news on a case that shook the nation 4 years ago. The murder of police constable Sharon Beshenivsky.
Good evening. A massive police manhunt is on in Bradford tonight after a policewoman was shot dead in the city centre.
38-year-old Sharon Beshenivsky had only been a serving officer for 9 months when she was murdered whilst on duty in November 2005. The married mother of 3 children and 2 stepchildren was responding to an armed robbery at a travel agency in Bradford city centre. Her last movements were caught on camera. Sharon and her colleague PC Teresa Milburn had been called to the scene, but on seeing the women, the gang opened fire. Both were shot in the chest. Teresa managed to survive, but sadly Sharon died as a result of her injuries. It was her daughter's 4th birthday.
A year later, 4 men were convicted of Sharon's murder, but police were still looking for 2 members of the gang. One of them was this man, Mustaf Jama. Now, we appealed for information about his whereabouts back in December 2005, and after a long hunt, he was discovered hiding out in Somalia, having used his friend's passport to flee. It took a covert military operation to bring Jama back to the UK. Well, great news, he finally faced trial in July this year and was found guilty of Sharon's murder. Though Jama did not fire the fatal shot, the prosecution said he was as much guilty of murder as the gunman. He will spend at least 35 years in prison. Now, only one suspect remains at large, and the police aren't giving up. Do you know where this man, Piran Ditta Khan, is tonight? Pick up the phone now if you have any information.
Now, back in 2007, we showed you this. It's CCTV of some bouncers being attacked at a club in Chingford in Essex. One doorman suffered a fractured skull and was left permanently brain damaged. Well, good news, as a direct result of our appeal, the main offenders, 4 members of the same family, were arrested and charged. In July, father and son Anton and Stephen Stratford were found guilty of GBH and sentenced to 8 years. And Anton's 2 other sons, Stuart and Mark, were found guilty of violent disorder and sentenced to 2 years. A great result, but these 5 men are still outstanding. So take a look, and if you recognise them, call now or text now. Our number again is there on the screen.
And finally, surprising developments on 2 cases we featured in 1998. A double murder in Hastings and the attempted murder and rape of a Czech student on a train to London.
We start with an extraordinary case, a double murder, or rather 2 separate murders, both of vulnerable people, both without apparent motive, and, as you'll see, they're linked by bizarre coincidence. They happened in January by the seaside in Hastings in Sussex.
Claire Letchford and Beryl O'Connor lived only 100 yards apart. They didn't know each other, but within 1 week both women were found murdered in their homes. They'd been strangled and then set alight. That same month, another woman, a 19-year-old Czech student, was the victim of a horrific attack on a train going from Hastings to London. Her injuries were so severe, it's a miracle she survived.
Well, earlier this month, a 36-year-old man was arrested and charged with all 3 offences. We'll keep you posted on what happens.
11 years ago, these images caused widespread revulsion. The men swaggering out after giving evidence to the Macpherson inquiry were the 5 suspected of the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Well, due in part to the recommendations from that inquiry, the 800-year-old law of double jeopardy, where no person can be tried for the same crime twice, was abolished in England and Wales. This summer, that change enabled a sex offender to be tried a 2nd time for a crime he'd already been acquitted of. Matthew takes up the story of Mario Celaire, the footballer who thought he had got away with murder.
The young woman who lay dying that night was 19-year-old Cassandra McDermott. In a sickening and frenzied attack, she'd been battered and left for dead by someone she loved. a young footballer called Mario Celaire. Just a schoolgirl when they started dating, Cassandra idolised Celaire. He seemed perfect, older, sophisticated and talented. Her mum was less impressed.
Initially it was a hidden relationship, and of course, being a mother, I wasn't happy, nor was I happy with the fact that he was that much older than her.
Her mother's instinct was right, but little did she realise Celaire's background was far worse than she'd imagined. He'd been jailed for 5 years for the gang rape of a teenage girl, and within months of his release, he'd become involved with another, Cassandra.
From everything I could establish, Cassandra and Celaire had a very happy relationship in the early days, but that relationship broke down and spiralled into violence.
Cassie was funny, she was intelligent, she was young. He manipulated, he controlled her, he intimidated her. Her whole personality changed.
Despite the violence, Cassandra couldn't make the break from Celaire until she met someone new. It would have catastrophic consequences. It's not clear whether it was jealousy at her new boyfriend, but Celaire's behaviour became more and more erratic. Over a period of weeks, he left message after message. It culminated when he went to Cassandra's mother's house one night when Cassandra was there alone.
Hey, Mario.
How you been? We're not exactly sure what happened that night, but clearly at some stage during the evening, Celaire must have snapped.
Get off me. Get off me!
It's not, I can't get a heartbeat or anything. Right, she's breathing. No, she's not breathing. She's dead.
I was totally beside myself when I found out. I was devastated.
There was no sign of a forced entry into Cassandra's house. Nothing had been stolen, and we suspected that this had been done by someone she knew.
The police quickly turned their attention to Celaire. Realising he had previous for rape, he was taken in for questioning. But already, he concocted a cover story.
Celaire admitted that he'd been round to see Cassandra that night and had been with her for 3 hours, but stated she was alive when he left her.
Bye.
But his story just didn't add up. Cassandra hadn't got home till midnight, and the post-mortem revealed she died 2 hours later at 2 a.m. Then detectives unearthed CCTV, showing Celaire leaving his room at the YMCA before the murder and returning afterwards. He was also caught on camera washing the clothes he'd been wearing that night. With the forensic evidence gone, would the police have a strong enough case?
I was confident that Celaire was responsible for Cassandra's murder. We'd put together a very detailed investigation. We could only bring a circumstantial case to court, and while circumstantial evidence can be very strong, you do have to convince the jury beyond reasonable doubt of a suspect's guilt.
After 2 weeks of evidence from the prosecution and the defence, the jury was sent out. After deliberating for days, they finally came back in. They'd reached a unanimous verdict. Mario Celaire was found not guilty.
I just felt as if the criminal justice system then had let me down so badly. It was just shock. I was more or less in the state that I was in when I heard about Cassandra's death.
Myself and other officers involved in the case, we sat on the benches outside the court in silence. We didn't say anything. We thought we'd lost the chance to convict Cassandra's murderer.
Within 3 years, Celaire had a new name and a new life. He was now calling himself Mario McNish and playing semi-professional football for Maidstone United. He even had a new girlfriend on his arm, an aspiring model called Cara Hoyt. But once again, he'd targeted a schoolgirl. Cara was just 15.
She was old enough to make her own mistakes. We all learn by our mistakes. And this is just one I wish she'd never made.
Cara became totally dominated by Celaire and had no idea about his violent past. until she found some court papers with details of Cassandra's trial.
She challenged Celaire about it, and he admitted to her they had an argument with a previous girlfriend who'd hit her head and later died.
It was an accident, yeah?
She died!
I didn't murder no one. It was an accident.
Cara believed Celaire's lies, and the relationship continued. But as with Cassandra, when Cara dated someone new, Celaire couldn't handle it.
Again, we think it was Celaire's jealousy that tipped him over the edge. He went round to Cara's flat that night, most probably wanting to sleep with her. But Cara's new boyfriend was also on his way round.
Fair enough. Fair enough, innit? I'll go.
When Cara rebuffed him and told him to leave, he must have got angry. There was a hammer near the door that he grabbed and hit her over the head with. Luckily, Cara's boyfriend then turned up and Celaire fled.
Cara!
Yeah. Tell me exactly what happened.
I don't know, man. I just came inside and my girlfriend, she was lying down and her head is just bleeding.
She's lying on the floor with her head?
No, she's on the bed and her whole head is just bleeding.
There's an ambulance on its way to you.
Cara suffered a massive trauma. Her skull had been smashed on the left side of her head, causing her brain to swell. She was rushed to hospital and into intensive care. But doctors only gave her 12 hours to live.
It was horrific to see that there's a big hole in her head. There's pieces of her skull embedded in her brain. They told me that her chances of survival were very, very, very low.
It'd been 5 years since Cassandra's trial. Then out of the blue, I got a call from police in Waltham Forest saying that Celaire was suspected of attempting to murder another woman. As we investigated that, I became convinced that he'd tried to do the same thing all over again.
Everything was pointing to Celaire.
Phone records placed Celaire at Cara's flat just before and just after the attack. Also, a witness saw a man running to a car similar to Celaire's that was parked outside Cara's flat.
But as before, there were no forensics. All of the evidence was circumstantial. Could Celaire get away with it again? It certainly looked like he would, but then Cara defied the doctors. She opened one of her eyes. Unbelievably, stood looking over her was the man who'd put her in hospital. And as she lay paralysed, Cara was unable to tell those around her what he'd done.
Tubes and I can't say it because there's tubes and this and it's horrible.
It was many months before Cara was well enough to be interviewed, but when she was interviewed, it was incredible. Not only was she able to tell us what had happened to her, but unbelievably, she was able to tell us that Celaire had admitted he'd been responsible for Cassandra's death.
Under the age-old double jeopardy laws, no person could be tried for the same crime twice. But since Cassandra's death, things had changed.
If there was new and compelling evidence, then a new trial could take place. There was now a chance that Celaire could finally be brought to justice.
This had never been done before, and the prospect of Celaire having to stand trial again for the murder of Cassandra was an exciting one.
In May this year, the case finally came to trial. Faced with overwhelming testimony from Cara, Celaire changed his plea to guilty on both the manslaughter of Cassandra McDermott and the attempted murder of Cara.
He was sentenced to a minimum of 23 years. He'll be 54 before he's considered for parole.
If it wasn't for Cara, we wouldn't be here today, so we hold everything to Cara.
Doctors say Cara may never fully recover, but she's determined to get on with her life.
Well, a stick, don't need it, and a splint, but slowly, but the arms, I can touch the toes, because co-press, because we're learning again.
Cara's bravery and determination to give evidence against Celaire was absolutely astonishing. It was her strength and determination that eventually brought justice for Cassandra.
Strong girl. Let's talk about the first trial. Seems amazing to me that was a not guilty verdict.
It is, and it was devastating for Cassandra's family. The problem for the original jury was that they never got to hear of Celaire's history of violence or his conviction for gang rape. That was all inadmissible. What they did hear was largely circumstantial. Now, the prosecution hoped that would be enough, but it wasn't.
It could all have gone the same way in the second trial if it hadn't been for the remarkable determination of Cara.
It was absolutely critical, the evidence she gave, and remarkably brave. She had to relive all of those events, and given the scale of her injuries, to have to describe to police what had actually happened. It took 4 separate sessions with detectives for her to give the detailed testimony that finally nailed Celaire. But she was determined that he wasn't going to get away with it again, that history wasn't going to repeat itself.
800 years of judicial history rolled back in England and Wales. Is it likely, do you think, Matthew, that we're going to see more of these trials?
I don't think so. There have only been 4 cases since the law changed in 2005. The first successful conviction was of Billy Dunlop for the murder of Julie Hogg. Now, he's now serving a life sentence. I mean, it's not going to be straightforward, these cases. It's not like a case of, let's just do it again. There is going to have to be new and compelling evidence, and then that evidence taken to the High Court. So I don't think a wave of cases.
Briefly, what about the Stephen Lawrence case?
Well, the Stephen Lawrence case, the files are still open. There would have to be new and compelling evidence, so it's a case of watch this space. I suppose what has now been established is that the door on these crimes is never, never closed.
Thanks, Matthew. Well, for advice and support about domestic violence, you could log on to our website, bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. Now here's Rav with what's been coming in on the phones tonight.
And we have had some good calls tonight. We'll start off with the Birmingham taxi driver brutally murdered in his cab. We've had 3 names suggested already for who may have been involved there. We've also had a couple who think they recognise that voice of the anonymous caller apparently admitting to the offence. That's also going to be on our website if you want to check that out. If you do know who that is, please do get in touch. Great response for the 25-year-old cold case, Melanie Road murder. We've had 11 names and counting, 2 of which are the same. More in the update show to follow.
OK, that's all for now. Details, of course, on all of tonight's cases are online. The address, it's bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. You can log on now for a live update on what's happening right here on the phones. Seems like it's been a pretty busy night. We'll confirm that later. The lines are open until midnight tonight and from 7:30 tomorrow morning. Our next programme, well, that's on Tuesday, the 29th of September. But don't go away, of course, because we're going to be back, the whole team, after the news with a full update on all of tonight's cases. If you can help but you haven't called yet, please do it now. It could all be down to you. See you at 10:45.
And the Crime Watch updates here on BBC One Northern Ireland will be at 25 past midnight.
The world's last unexplored